All right, so this is the second of our lightning units. This is the American colonies. And our guiding questions for this unit are going to be, in what ways did religion shape American colonization? And number two, how diverse were Britain's colonies in America? Now this is the pretest, so if you haven't seen it and you want to pause it and take a minute to try to figure that out, go right ahead and then just pick up from this point. Okay, now we all know, or we should know, that this is largely a country settled by the English. But what you might not know is that North America was almost a Spanish country. Because Columbus was funded by Spain, his voyages after 1492 allowed more and more Spanish influence in Central and South America and up into North America. The oldest permanently settled city in North America is actually St. Augustine, Florida, which is a Spanish settlement. So, if it had not been for one key event, it's very likely that America would not have its English heritage as it does. And that major event in 1588 was the English defeat of the Spanish Armada. Once the Spanish lost to the English, they lost control of the Atlantic Ocean, and it was therefore too costly and too risky to try to travel back and forth with the English enforcement ships in the Atlantic. Now, most people know that the first settlement in the first English settlement in the Americas was Jamestown. What a lot of people do not know is that there were other attempts at English settlement that were not successful. There was an unsuccessful attempt in Maine, which failed because of poor climate and poor planning. There was Sir Humphrey Gilbert's attempt in Newfoundland, which fell away largely because of similar reasons. So another fail there. And then there was the story of Roanoke with Sir Walter Raleigh and their return journeys to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, only to find the settlers had disappeared with a lone word of Croatoan carved into a post and around the area. So no one is exactly sure what happened to the English settlers at Roanoke, so it is one of history's mysteries that we are still trying to pinpoint a definite cause of their disappearance. So another fail there with that. So the English decide that it's not that they're going in winter or that they are choosing poor locations or that they are not bringing enough supplies and food. The English decide that the problem is actually settlement. And they decide that really what they're after in the New World is not colonies as much as this right here, gold. And gold was one of what I call the 3 Gs: gold, God, and glory. So not only the English, but the Spanish and the French as well bring over explorers in search of gold. They bring ministers with them to convert the natives to Christianity, and they seek glory. They want to be the kingdom with the farthest spread colonies. The more dominion that you have, the more land that you hold, the more powerful you are. So in 1697, we're going to see a group of English settlers, the Virginia Joint Stock Company, come together to land in what would be called Virginia in honor of Queen Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. And they found the first English settlement, and that is Jamestown. Now, when we think about Jamestown, we think of John Smith, we think of Pocahontas, Some of us think of the starving time. We also need to think about just how ill prepared the settlers were to voyage into the wilderness of the New World here. They brought very few supplies. They had terrible work ethic. They were mostly gentry, and many of them had not been used to hard work and the kind of hard work that it would take to carve out a niche in the New World. They were hostile with their neighbors, which were the local native tribes. They set up in a swamp, so there was disease rampant carried by mosquitoes. There was not clear, healthy drinking water. So yeah, it was really a bad choice, followed by a bad choice, followed by a bad choice, the entire early years of Jamestown. Now, this is what a lot of people think of with Jamestown. John Smith and Pocahontas, and shame on you, Disney, for getting this thing all worked up. As we talked about in class, Pocahontas was more than likely a nickname. Her real name was probably something else. A lot of people think Mataoka, and that Pocahontas was a nickname given to her. She was actually 11 or 12 when the English encountered her to a degree where she would be known. So she's not this 21-year-old buxom beauty here that is in a lip lock with John Smith. And her and John Smith never had any kind of love affair that was reciprocated. So this, what you see in front of you, is the holy trinity of Jamestown here as far as what we think about. You've got John Smith over here, who Admiral of New England, the captain himself, again, who had kind of a dodgy background, could have possibly been a mercenary. In the middle, we see Pocahontas. To look at this portrait, you would not think it was Pocahontas, but it was her. She took a different name when her husband took her to England, and of course they painted her lighter skin than what she actually was. And on the right side here, we see John Rolfe. This is the man that actually married Pocahontas. So when he takes her to England, she makes the grand tour. She's introduced. Everyone marvels at her ability to move from what they considered such a savage people to civilized society. She contracts smallpox and dies. So, nice choice, Pocahontas. All right. John Rolfe is really important to Jamestown because of this right here. This is tobacco, and this is what saved Jamestown. John Rolfe mixed a harsh Native American tobacco with a more mild Jamaican leaf tobacco, and creating the Virginia blend that smokers smoke today. And King James himself called this a vile weed, but tobacco took off like wildfire. Everybody, from rich to poor, from men, women, they were all taking in this tobacco. And so it brought huge amounts of money to Jamestown. Now, another thing that a lot of people think of when they think of the New World is the Mayflower and the Pilgrims. And that all starts with the Protestant Reformation, and that's this guy right here, Martin Luther. And Martin Luther used a relatively new invention called the printing press to help spread this revolution. Now, Martin Luther probably did not set out to change the world of religion and the world in all other ways. When he nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the Catholic Church there in Wittenberg. But he did have several complaints against Catholic teachings and Catholic practices. And the printing press created by Gutenberg had a movable type. He translated the Bible into German so that the common people could read it. And now it was not drawn out by hand. It was not monks sitting at a table copying word for word from the Bible. It could be done very, very quickly And so the Bible, in a language that was readable to people, was now going out to more and more people. So the complaints that Luther had against the church can be summarized really in three categories. Salvation. He believed that salvation came through faith, not through works. Communication. He believed that people could talk to God directly and not have to go through priests. And three, he had a problem with a lot of the doctrines of the Catholic Church, including things like the selling of indulgences, which is kind of a get-out-of-hell-free card if you contributed to the church, especially financially. Now, there was another guy that spun off from Luther, and his name was John Calvin. Calvinism is the name of the theology that comes from him, and the most recognizable component of it is predestination, the idea that God has preordained who will be saved and who will not, the elect and the non-elect. And this was a very, very influential doctrine, and in fact, most of the Puritan thought in America was Calvinistic thought. Now, Henry VIII, this was a man that at least brought the Protestant Reformation to England on a large scale. There is a video that is on here right after that from Horrible Histories. You can go to YouTube and you can search for Horrible Histories, Henry VIII, and you can watch that in detail. I'm not going to let it play through, but it is pretty funny, and it gives you an idea of what the problem was with Henry and the Catholic Church. Now, all the world was Catholic before the Protestant Reformation, including England. Even after the Protestant Reformation, England remains Catholic for a time. King Henry, however, is dissatisfied with his current wife. He went through 6 of them. He wanted an annulment or a granting of separation. He could not divorce because the Catholic Church forbade it, but he could get an annulment, and he wanted a new wife because he was not getting the sons that he wanted. And he basically was rejected by the Pope. Pope said, "We will not give you another annulment." He says that he will start his own church called the Church of England. It became the state church, and he became the head. Now, it was pretty much the Catholic Church with a different pope and a different title. So his daughter, Queen Elizabeth, who actually took the throne, it is under her reign that a lot of the travels to the New World took place. And we can see that through the window, the ship sailing, indicative of all of the voyaging that was happening during her reign. Now in America, jumping over here across the pond, there was not really a separation of church and state. If you did not do what the church desired, then you were living outside the church's laws, God's laws, and the laws of the state. You could be punished by the state for not attending church, for example. 2 of the major Puritan colonies were Massachusetts and Connecticut, and that's where this separation of church and state is especially not going to exist. However, there were people who believed in the separation of church and state, like Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson, who was a woman who had prayer services in her home and was banished. And so she went, along with a lot of other dissenters, people that went against the church, to the new colony of Rhode Island, again founded by Roger Williams, where religious toleration was a little more evident. Now, the Puritans are just one piece of the puzzle of American religious diversity. There were not just Puritans here. There were everything from deists to Catholics to Jews to agnostics to atheists, Muslims. A lot of people don't realize that Muslims and Jews were in America at the early colonial times. So it is a rich and varied religious history that we have. All right, now in conclusion, there are 3 sections that the colonies are divided into. There's New England, and you can see those here highlighted. The main industry of New England was fishing and shipbuilding. The middle colonies, which you can see here, it was wheat and shipbuilding and timber predominantly. Southern colonies are going to be largely tobacco. All right, so here's your post-test. That is the second of our lightning units. Tomorrow we will continue on, and we will be talking about the American Revolution and the founding documents.